shrine is filled with items that both fascinate Gabriel and also make his skin crawl.
Magenta Moonbeam. Voodoo Inn.
A flyer advertising Magenta Moonbeam, a local voodoo inn. Her parlor is on the corner of Orleans and Dauphine. An official voodoo wishing stump. Rub it and make a wish, a card says.
Funny, I say the same thing to women. I wish Molly Getty were mine forever. Really, I mean it.
What was that?
Huh? Nothing. Could I ask you a few questions?
That is why I am here.
What can you tell me about voodoo?
Historical voodoo, or the voodoo currently practiced in the city.
What do you know about the voodoo murders?
The killings in the newspaper. I know they have nothing to do with true voodoo in New Orleans.
What makes you think the voodoo murders aren't being done by local practitioners?
Voodoo is a popular boogeyman, Mr. Knight, especially in New Orleans. Anyone can pretend to use it, just as anyone can pretend to be a black belt in karate. And for the same reason, to intimidate. I know voodoo in this city, Mr. Knight, and believe me, it is not about killing. Even the police have stated that the killings have nothing to do with local voodoo.
So you know nothing about the voodoo murders case?
I neither know nor care to know, Mr. Knight. My only possible interest is in how it might affect the public's attitude towards the museum. So far, it has not been an issue. No one has even had the bad taste to bring it up. Until you, that is.
What do you think of New Orleans?
It is the only city in the United States, as far as I am concerned.
What is it about New Orleans that you so admire?
It has a real culture of its own, Mr. Knight. Amid the horrid blandness that is Americana, New Orleans alone has a voice.
Spoken like a true New Orleanian. Do you know anything about snakes?
Ah, you have perhaps noticed the museum snake, Mr. Knight? They are beautiful creatures. Do you not agree? And the tourists seem to associate them with voodoo.
Is this snake yours? Do you use it in your practice of voodoo?
I admire the spirit of the snake, Mr. Knight. But snakes like the museums can be quite dangerous to handle.
You didn't really answer my question.
I think I did, Mr. Knight.
Tell me about yourself.
Me?
Yes, if you don't mind.
What is it you wish to learn?
Why did you open a voodoo museum?
The subject has fascinated me all my life, and I wanted to help preserve the cultural heritage it represents.
What kind of background in voodoo do you have?
Let us just say I cut my teeth on it, Mr. Knight. It is in my blood.
Do you do anything besides run the museum?
No. The museum does not make me a rich man. But my material needs are simple. I prefer to focus on my one true interest in life.
What are your own religious beliefs?
My beliefs are too personal and too complex to discuss with a layman, Mr. Knight.
Just tell me anything.
I am originally from the West Indies myself, you know.
Really? What brought you to New Orleans?
I was drawn here for personal reasons.
Actually, I can't think of a thing.
Then let us discuss something else.
Tell me about historical voodoo.
Very well. I will start at the beginning, Mr. Knight, and will go on from there at your prompting.
Sounds good.
As you may know, voodoo is a grassroots religion, formed by the mixing together of many different African tribal religions and Anglo religions, such as Catholicism or Protestantism. In other words, it is a religion born of the African slave trade. But African slaves were imported not only by the United States, but also into the West Indies, where the French and Spanish ran plantation islands. Prior to 1803, The New Orleans area was owned by France. The French Creole in those days owned many African slaves. But the Creole did not permit their slaves to gather, giving no chance for voodoo to breed here natively. The Creole also knew enough about the corrupted pagan practices of the West Indies slaves to ban the importings of slaves from that region.
So how did voodoo come to New Orleans?
After the Louisiana Purchase, American legislators relaxed regulations. Slaves were permitted to gather. The Americans also removed the ban on West Indies slaves. Around the same time, a slave revolt occurred in Santo Domingo, what is now Haiti. Between the lifting of the ban and the Haitian Revolt, West Indies slaves began pouring into New Orleans. Some of them were free people of color, freed or escaped slaves. Some came with their white owners who were fleeing from the revolt.
What happened when the West Indies slaves got here?
They brought voodoo with them. The native slaves were more than enthusiastic about embracing it. It gave them power, Mr. Knight. If only in the form of a communal bond. Among the first meeting places were the Bayou St. John and the Shore of Lake Pontchartrain. The early voodoos were heavy snake worshippers, worshipping the one they called the Great Zombie.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
By 1817, the voodoo activities were beginning to cause fear among the white slave owners. An ordinance was passed to forbid slave gatherings except in designated public areas at designated times. The time was Sunday afternoons, and the place, Congo Square. The slaves and free people of color gathered to dance simulations of their voodoo dances, right in sight of Creole society. Of course, they also continued to meet in private for the real thing.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
There were a variety of kings and queens at first, voodoo priests and priestesses. But from about 1830, a single power emerged. This was a voodoo queen named Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau ruled voodoo in New Orleans for many years.
Tell me about current voodoo.
Many people think of voodoo in terms of magic spells or gree-gree. That kind of practice is actually called hoodoo and is only a part of true voodoo. Voodoo, the religion, has a strong following in New Orleans. In fact, it is growing quite rapidly. There are several voodoo churches or temples in the city, and others all across the United States. African Americans see it as a tradition all their own. Whites, and there are many in the religion, are attracted to it because they think it is exotic. I personally am more interested in the history of voodoo. Some of the new movements are copying Haitian or even African voodoo. But it is the voodoo of New Orleans that I find so intriguing.
Tell me about Marie Laveau.
There were actually two Marie Laveaus, mother and daughter. Most people thought they were the same woman. Her continued youth added to the mystique. The original, the mother, was also known as Widow Paris. It was she that began the empire.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
The Laveau tomb, where one or both of the Maries are believed to be buried, is in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. It is a popular shrine for practitioners and tourists alike. I myself take tours through the cemetery on a regular basis.
Really? Do you have any running this week?
No, but the cemetery is open to the general public as well.
What exactly is hoodoo?
Hoodoo refers to magic folk traditions of the South. Hoodoo is a bastard of voodoo. Many of the gree-gree are similar, but hoodoo does not have the religious aspects of voodoo.
So how's the museum business?
Those who truly seek to understand are few, Mr. Knight. But even one can be an audience.
Sounds about like my shop.
A sign on the front door of Magenta's home reads, "Attuning with the Spirit Realm," back on June 22nd.
Hello there. Got a sec?
Go ahead. These folks ain't in no hurry.
What can you tell me about voodoo?
They say it was part of an old religion from Africa, brought here by slaves.
What can you tell me about voodoo?
I don't really care to talk about it. I don't do it none myself.
What do you know about the voodoo murders?
Isn't it just awful, them finding those bodies with the voodoo things around them? I don't think there's any real voodoo going on. Somebody trying to cover their tracks is all.
What do you know about the voodoo murders?
I told you all I know about that.
What can you tell me about New Orleans?
Seem like everyone wants to visit New Orleans at least once in their lives. And they love the cemetery tours. I see tourists in here every day of the year.
What can you tell me about New Orleans?
There are lots of things to see here, but none as beautiful as St. Louis Cemetery number 1.
What can you tell me about New Orleans?
If you want to know more, you should ask someone else.
Do you know anything about snakes?
Snakes? I see snakes around here all the time. Most of them aren't poisonous, of course. I don't mind snakes myself, but lots of folks are afraid of them.
Do you know anything about snakes?
I told you all I know about that.
Do you know anything about Marie Laveau?
Sure. She was the voodoo queen of New Orleans, a powerful voodooienne and a powerful sorceress. Believers still come to her tomb, you know. They write secret marks on the walls, leave offerings. Then there's the tourists. They come out of curiosity. As a matter of fact, that big Dr. John fella from that voodoo museum, he's here at least once a day. But Marie Laveau's tomb isn't the only one the believers visit and make markings and leave offerings at.
What else can you tell me about Marie Laveau?
Her tomb's on all our tours. Even the Baptists come round here to gawk. Of course, you may not know this, but some of the real serious voodoo types argue that she ain't in this one at all. Down in the unmarked tomb in number 3. It's all the same to me, I say. Saved me a lot of cleanup work if she weren't here, if you ask me.
Tell me about yourself.
My name is Toussaint Gervais. I'm the watchman here at St. Louis number 1.
What exactly do you do here?
Oh, I keep the place tidy, of course, but a big part of my job, too, is looking out for the grievers. People come to pay their respects, and they need looking out for. Sometimes they so grief-bound, they don't know what they doing.
Tell me about yourself.
That's about all there is to say.
Tell me something about St. Louis Cemetery number 1.
You know why the dead are buried in tombs and not in the ground, don't you? The water table's too high. Them coffins will float right out of their grave. Ha! Them dead will go floating right down into the Dakota. Of course, if it were Mardi Gras, nobody'd even notice. It's a historical place. People buried in here from the Civil War. Back further, too. Take a look around. You'll see.
You said there were other mock tombs?
Yep. I've seen bull hearts left on tombs and a nest of vulture feathers, plates of peas and corn green, animal parts, human parts even, it looked like. Male parts, if you get my meaning. And this is one of the great family crypts, mind you. Odd how them types just pick a spot and stick to it.
You been working here a long time?
Longer than you've been alive, son. I may perhaps be here longer than you'll be alive, for that matter.
This is the tomb of Marie Laveau, Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. The tomb is securely closed. Odd-looking marks adorn the Laveau tomb wall. The wall doesn't work that way.
I want a copy of these strange marks.
Near the Laveau tomb is a piece of red brick, undoubtedly a cast-off from spiritual graffiti writers. The imposing tomb is elaborately labeled Getty. An angel draped dramatically over a stone plinth marks the entrance to a large tomb. There's a small marble plate near the tomb doors. The plate is in locked position. There's a keyhole on the plate, but Gabriel can't operate that without a key.
I don't need to go visit the family tomb today. Does this mean anything to you?
Sure, I see them marks all the time on the tombs. Don't know what they mean, though.